Hosea 10 verse 4. Hosea 10:4, he says, the they is referring back in verse 1 to Israel. They have spoken words, swearing falsely in making covenants. Thus judgment springeth up as hemlock in the furrows of the field. So what's gonna happen is weeds take over. You know, it doesn't take you long. If you're trying to build you a garden, or you're trying to have a little rose garden or something, a flower bed, overnight the weeds just multiply. And you can't get anything else to grow like that, but the weeds go crazy. He says they were covenant breakers, making false covenants. They'd make a fake covenant, or they would make a real one and break it. Mm-hmm. That's Hosea 10, verse 4. Covenant breakers, that's God started the nation by making a covenant with them. In fact, your reference has it right there that you used, Exodus 24. Exodus 24. Exodus 24:7. This is the covenant that they're making. And he took the book of the covenant. Exodus 24:7. Moses, he took the book of the covenant and read it in the audience of all the people. And they said, here they're making a covenant, they're signing their names. All that the Lord hath said we will do, and be obedient. They said, we agree to that. Sounds like a good plan. Now, I don't know. It would have been wrong for them to say no. We won't do that. I mean, that'd be pure out rebellion. I think I would have tried to negotiate. Say, man, I like the good stuff, but that would sure be hard for me because I know I'm stubborn. But he did put a system in place so that they could get forgiveness when they did sin, and they had to do the commandments. The main problem was their heart was wrong. Okay, look at 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy 3. At the end of the age, now it'll be this way at the end of our age, but at the end of the tribulation time period, all of this stuff comes back to play like it was in the Old Testament. And of course they're wanting their Messiah to return, and so it's going to be they're paying for breaking the covenant, and he's going to remind them of it. 2 Timothy 3 verse 12. Yea, and all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. That sounds like a positive verse. That's what's going to happen. Persecution is going to be on the rise. That's the forecast for today. Persecution is going up. It doesn't go down, it goes up. Verse 13. But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. That's that covenant breaking. That's promising one thing and doing just the opposite. In other words, 90% of the nation is going to be politicians. They're going to be covenant makers and breakers. Do what? Going to be, yeah, right. That he calls them evil men. Now, we're going to find out as we get into this, there's some people you can't trust, so don't start it. When somebody has shown their hand that they're evil, don't trust anything they say. Okay, here, the evil with Israel was they made a covenant with God and they broke it. So they're going to do the same to every other nation and person they get to the covenant table with. They're going to break it. And in the tribulation, God's going to give them a mirror and put it right in their face. The Antichrist is going to make a covenant and break it. And that's going to be their doom. Look at Hebrews 1. Hebrews 1 verse 2. Hebrews 1, 2. Of course, Hebrews is written to Hebrews. That's a hard one to figure out. So it's a Jewish slant to this book. He says, verse 2, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the worlds. Okay, so that gives you the tone of the book. Okay, he's talking about the last days. Now go to chapter 8. Chapter 8, verse 8. Hebrews 8, verse 8. For finding fault with them, he saith, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. So they've broken the covenant. Once it's broke, he says, let's throw it out. Let's get a new one. Okay? So he's going to continue. You know, when you break something, the old saying was, you break it, you pay for it. You know, I guess they don't do that anymore, but used to, you broke it, you paid for it. And that, you learned to put your hands in your pocket when you went to the store. But here he's saying the old covenant, Israel broke it, now they're going to pay. That's what Daniel's 70 weeks is all about, and tribulation is all about. That's the final payment. Once that's been complete, he'll make a new covenant with them. And that one he'll write in their heart and in their minds, and they won't break it. Now he said over in Hosea that the weeds take over. He says judgment springs up like hemlock in the furrows of the field. Because if you sow something, you have to reap it, and you always reap more than you sow. So what Israel has done is they've been lying. Yeah, we're going to go serve God on Sunday or on whatever the worship day is, whatever feast we're going to do, and then we'll run off and serve Baal as well. You can't do both. And so because of that, he says you're a bunch of hypocrites. Therefore, hypocrites have to be repaid. And look at it in Revelation. Revelation 12, verse 9. I hate to tell people this, but it is the fact. If you walk contrary to God, he'll turn around and walk contrary to you. You know, God can be a deceiver. He said he's going to send strong delusion. This is God saying this. I will send strong delusion that they believe a lie. So Israel's walked contrary to God, been deceptive with him. He's going to pull the same stunt on them. Revelation 12, verse 9. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent, called the devil and Satan. And here's his job, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Look at it in chapter 13. Chapter 13, verse 14. Deception is going to be on the rise. Persecution is going up and deception is going up. Revelation 13, 14. And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he hath power to do in the sight of the beast. So it's going to be a religious deception. Miracles. You know, that's what Israel had done to God. They deceived him. They acted like they were obeying all the precepts and the commandments, and yet they were sneaking off and serving Baal, building groves in every high hill and under every great green tree. That's what he says in the Old Testament. So because of that, he says, okay, we'll flip it, and I'll show you what that feels like and looks like. And so that's how the Antichrist shows up, doing what appears to be miracles, but it's deception. Look at chapter 18, Revelation 18. Revelation 18:23. Revelation 18:23. And the light of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For all thy merchants were great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. It's a worldwide problem. Deception. And it's when the Antichrist gets here, it's just going to turn up on high. And I think before we leave, he's prepping everything, and God keeps giving him more and more power for his time to take over. And we're going to be seeing probably the beginnings of all that mess. Deuteronomy 31. Deuteronomy 31, verse 20. For when I shall have brought them into the land which I swear unto their fathers, that floweth with milk and honey, and they shall have eaten and filled themselves, and waxen fat, then will they turn unto other gods. So don't get fat. Now, your weight is not what he's referring to. He's referring to having everything they could ever want. You know, back in these ancient times, having food, you didn't have a grocery store, you didn't have a refrigerator, you didn't have all the modern conveniences we have. If you got you a meal a day, you were doing well. And you weren't planning meals. And, you know, you couldn't just go down to McDonald's. Of course, I don't know why anybody do that anyway. But here, they're getting all they can want to eat. Over in Canaan, you saw when the spies went in, they came back, and what was the great thing that everybody's eyes bulged out at? All the wonderful food. Food meant something. And so here they've gotten all this food, and what happens? They turn to other gods and serve them. He says that does something, and provoke me and break my covenant. It doesn't start out with we're going to break God's covenant. It starts out with we've been overblessed. And then it goes into we'll just enjoy it. We've got it. Why not use it? Okay, splurging, taking more than you need. That's an American problem. You go to I hate that they do this nowadays, but if you go to a restaurant, they're going to give you more than you can eat. And you know it's wrong for you to eat it all? We think of it as wasting money because we're leaving it on the plate. How about this? You don't need it. Eat what you need and leave it. That's preaching. We better get off of that. Joshua 23. Do what? Joshua 23, verse 16. Joshua 23:16. When you have transgressed the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and have gone and served other gods, and bowed yourselves to them, then shall the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and ye shall perish quickly from off the good land which he hath given unto you. Okay, the thing that made them serve, or made them feel like they could go serve other gods, was they had everything they wanted, the good land. Well, that good land came from somewhere, a good God. And they went and served wicked, evil gods. So they get what wicked, evil gods give you. Curses. And that's what they got. Look at it in chapter 2, Judges 2, verse 20. Oh, I told you Joshua before. This is Judges now. Judges 2, verse 20. Judges 2, verse 20. I've got a video somewhere on how I see the books of the Bible laid out in a dispensational pattern. Here's the pattern up to Judges is under Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You've got one man running the show, and you have to get all your info from one man. Joshua comes in. Joshua is the name for Jesus. Joshua comes in, and there you have to get all your information from a book. The books that were written from Moses' time, and everybody's supposed to obey that. Then Joshua goes off the scene, and then we have the book of Judges. You know what happens? Men are not obeying the book, and there's nobody there, one leader to enforce it. So you got the church age, and most people are not obeying the book. And so what happens in Judges? They go into captivity, out of captivity. They're hot and they're cold, and they're hot and they're cold. That's Christians. Judges 2, verse 20. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. And he said, because that this people hath transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and have not hearkened unto my voice. He's going to let them have it. And he tells them exactly why. Because of the covenant. They had made a promise. You don't make a promise to God and then break it. He says it'd be better to not vow a vow than to vow one and break it. That's bad news. 1 Kings 11:11. 1 Kings 11:11. Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon, forasmuch as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant in my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. This just reminded me. Y'all love it when I go off script. Remember your question not long ago about, what was that in Deuteronomy? About them marrying? Yes. Marrying people that were in the land or from the foreign nations. Okay, if you can marry those that are in foreign nations, why would it be wrong for Solomon to marry the daughter of the king of Egypt? You get it backwards. No, they could marry anybody that was outside. Egypt was outside. Egypt is not in Canaan, so that would be legal.
I believe you said before that Egypt was a place of great evil.
It is, yes.
And that was the issue, that he was bringing evil into his house.
Yeah. The answer is this, that in the Old Testament, where they're allowed to marry a woman of another nation that was not in Canaan, was they had destroyed the nation and killed all the men. There was no place for them to run back to and have a pagan homestead. With Solomon, he had not destroyed Egypt. So he's marrying someone who still has ties and connections to the wickedness, and she brought it with her. And so that was the thing I saw with that. Okay, let's go to Psalm 44. Psalm 44, verse 17. Let me turn there. You could spend a lifetime in the book of Psalms. Psalm 44, 17. Let's go back to verse 14. Thou makest us a byword among the heathen, a shaking of the head among the people. My confusion is continually before me. So forth, so on. He's talking about them being punished by the heathen nations. And it's God who's instigating it all. Just like the punishment we've been reading about. Go down to 16. For the voice of him that reproacheth and blasphemeth by reason of the enemy and avenger. All this has come upon us, yet have we not forgotten thee. Really? The way they remembered him was in vain. Neither have we dealt falsely in thy covenant. You want to bet? That was their problem. Is they had dealt falsely with it. They had been lying to God, and then you're trying to use him. That's the problem. Man likes to use people, a user. They were trying to use God, get the blessings out of him, and run over to Baal and serve him for whatever pleasures he thought was there. Look at Proverbs 2, verse 17. Proverbs 2:17.
Is that anything like Saul when Saul had told Samuel, no, we've performed our duty. We killed all of them. And Samuel says, what is the...
Yeah, bleeding of the sheep out here.
Is that the same?
Yeah. Proverbs 2:17. Which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God. It's easy to forget. Now, the older you get, the more you'll understand that. But it's easy to forget things. And it's not so much that you intend to. It's that it's not predominant in your mind. If it's important to you, it stays center focus of your mind. So obviously it wasn't that important to them, or they would not have forgotten it. Look at Isaiah 24. Isaiah 24, verse 5. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, and broken the everlasting covenant. There are so many verses in the Bible on this covenant breaking thing. We would go for a while. I'm going to start skipping now. But when you get the notes for this one day, if we ever finish this book, you'll see it's an endless list. Not endless, but there's a bunch of them. Let's go to Daniel. Daniel 11, verse 22. Daniel 11:22. He says, "And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken. Yea, also the prince of the covenant." Look at verse 28. "Then shall he return unto his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land." Historically, this has been the thing that's always happened. They make a covenant and appear as though they're going to make peace when all their intention is to backstab you the first chance they get. And you just study history, and that's what it's been all about. Look at Isaiah. I need to give you this one. Isaiah 28. Isaiah 28:15. I would think that if I had made a covenant with God and broke it, I wouldn't go around trying to make another covenant with anybody. I'd say, okay, I'm not good at covenants. Let's forget that. Israel didn't. When they couldn't keep their covenant to God, they ran to the devil and tried to make one with him. Isaiah 28:15. "Because ye have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with hell are we in agreement. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come unto us. For we have made lies our refuge, and under falsehood have we hid ourselves." Whew. Talk about somebody who's fried in the brain. Well, we got a nation full of people like that now. Wiccan. They're openly saying they're worshiping the devil. Has the devil ever been honorable in anything?
You reminded me of something I saw that just absolutely shocked me. I was almost to the shop last week, and there was somebody with, on the back of their license plate, you know, you can get these customized ones. It said Wicca, and then on their back window, it had a clergy sticker.
Oh, wow.
I was
Yeah.
like, whoa, this is a whole different level of
Yep.
evil.
Mm-hmm.
I actually spoke to Satanists once, if I may bring this up. They said for Carl correctly, what Carl was saying is that the reason for them was, it wasn't, or at least for other with Satanists, whatever. Well, that's that conversation. It was that for at least certain Satanists, it wasn't so much about being anti-Christian, it's just rebelling against the parents who were forcing Christianity on them. So not so much about forcing Satan for some of these people.
Sure.
It is being rebelling against the parents.
Yeah, it's called "We've Made Lies Our Refuge." The rebellious children. They have all kinds of lies they use. That's one of them. Here's another one. We don't actually serve Satan. We don't believe there is a Satan. We serve Lucifer, the light bearer. Okay, that's the other line they use. I mean, once you start down the devil, you could list the devil's lies a mile long. And that's where you get in trouble. But look what God has to say about it. Isaiah 28:18. "Your covenant with death shall be disannulled." You know, just like you broke my covenant, I'll turn around and break the covenant you're making. "And your agreement with hell shall not stand. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, then ye shall be trodden down by it." Whew. God said, makes all the covenants you want. I made you as a nation. I can destroy you anytime I feel like. That was what the parents used to say. I brought you into this world and I can take you out. That's right. Make you think they could. And that's exactly what God's doing. All right, we've got enough verses on that. I think we need to move on. Hosea 10. Hosea 10, verse 5. Hosea 10, verse 5. Hosea 10:5. He says, the inhabitants of Samaria shall fear because of the calves of Bethaven. Okay, you see that word Bethaven? I'm pointing this out because in a minute he's going to use just a slang of that word. See, 1, 2, 3, the last 4 letters of it are Avim. So it could either be called Bethaven if you're going to use the whole name, or Avim. For the people thereof shall mourn over it, and the priests thereof shall rejoice on it. For the glory thereof, because it is departed from it. The it here is this altar and the calves of Bethaven. It shall be carried unto Assyria for a present to King Jareb. Ephraim shall receive shame, and Israel shall be ashamed of his own counsel. So they've been serving Baal and building this pagan worship service here, center in Bethaven. And he says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the king, this pagan king, come in and capture and take your God, if he was so great to protect you. Matter of fact, you're going into service and you can take that little God with you. And that's what they do. Isaiah 46. Isaiah 46 verse 1. Here the God goes, little g. Bel boweth down, Nebo stoopeth. Their idols were upon the beast and upon the cattle. Your carriages were heavy laden. They are a burden to the weary beast. That is, they're loading them all up and carrying them away. They stoop, they bow down together. They could not deliver the burden, but themselves are gone into captivity. The false gods didn't help a bit. When they go into captivity, they're going to take the little gods with them, and the kings are going to steal it from them. Look at Jeremiah 43. Jeremiah 43. And I believe it is in Exodus, he says that he calls out their gods, and in the thing that they were proud of, he shows them to be false and makes them ashamed of it. God likes to call the false gods out in the street and have a little street fight with them.
Yes, he does.
And that's what he's doing.
Wasn't that like, use the plagues to mock their gods?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, all those plagues were something. It was almost like India. You know, India has everything can be worshipped except for God. That's the way Egypt was. They worshipped 1 billion different gods, little gods. Jeremiah 43 verse 12. And I will kindle a fire in the house of the gods of Egypt, and he shall burn them and carry them away captives. And he shall array himself with the lands of Egypt, as a shepherd putteth on his garment, and he shall go forth from thence in peace. Now look at the beginning of that. And I will kindle a fire in the houses of the gods of Egypt. Okay, so they've got these gods of Egypt worship center, house. You'll find it in India. They have a little, what looks like a bus stop. And in it is housed all the little gods. That's a house of gods. This is from Egypt originally. And he says he's going to carry them away. And they're going to burn them and so forth, so on. This is this Nebuchadnezzar or Sennacherib, one of them. Verse 13. He shall break also the images of Bethshemesh, that is in the land of Egypt, and the houses of the gods of the Egyptians shall he burn with fire. Now notice that the one who's doing all this burning and taking it away, he's likened to a shepherd. Just like Jesus Christ is likened to the shepherd. So this is all done at the instigation of God, and he's likening himself to the one who's reaping havoc on them. Look at it in Daniel 11. Daniel 11 verse 7. Daniel 11 verse 7. But out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the forces of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail, and shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold, and shall continue more years than the king of the north. It says when he takes them captive, he does the same thing that was the downfall for Israel. I never understood this. This was a pagan mindset. I don't understand how Israel got conned into doing this. What would happen is a pagan king, and you find it in that book, the Mesopotamia book, the pagan king would come in and destroy a nation. And before he left, to do honor to their god for giving up, he would take that god back to his country and serve it. Why? You just beat it. That's exactly what Israel did. Israel had kicked out the Canaanites, all those nations, and yet then they started turning around and serving their gods. Didn't make any sense. But that's what they did. Hosea 10 verse 7.
I might get it.
Do I?
I might have an explanation.
Go ahead.
One thing is that maybe that, I don't know, but maybe what they just need an excuse to justify their sin.
Yeah, you got
That
it.
was the excuse they used.
That's it.
Maybe
Yeah,
there were another better excuse than that there.
that's it. You got it. Verse 7. As for Samaria, her king is cut off as the foam upon the water. Now that's a great description right there. Samaria's king is cut off as the foam upon the water. You know, when water gets foamy, that means it's been churned up. There's a storm out there. There's a tsunami coming. And that's the water is just raging. Look at it in 2 Kings 15. 2 Kings 15, verse 30. And Hosea the son of Elah made a conspiracy against Pekah the son of Remaliah, and smote him and slew him and reigned in his stead in the 20th year of Jotham the son of Uzziah. Okay, so here's how corrupt politicians get ahead. They kill off the competition. Just ask Hillary. Well, it's not changed much. I mean, maybe it's become a little less obvious, but they're still doing the same tricks. Look at it in 2 Kings 17:4. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hosea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. I'd say there's some turbulence being stirred up in the waters. Yeah, the foam's about to come to the surface. Look at it in Mark 9. Mark 9, verse 18. Now this foam is, just run it through your Bible. I don't ever see foam being used as a good thing. It's got a satanic connotation behind it. Rebellion. Mark 9, verse 18. And whosoever he taketh him, and wheresoever he taketh him, he teareth him. This is a possessed person, and the demon is doing this to him. Teareth him. And he foameth and gnasheth with his teeth. You know, gnashing of teeth, that's what goes on in hell. The response from a human is foaming at the mouth. And pineth away, and I spake to thy disciples that they should cast him out, and they could not. So this is a strong satanic force. The evidence of it in a human form is he's foaming at the mouth. The description was foam on the water. Look at it in Jude verse 13. Jude verse 13. Now the description of wicked men. Jude verse 13. Raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame. You see that now? The wickedness people are proud of and not ashamed to talk about and post on Facebook. It's everywhere. It's like this right here, foaming out their own shame. Wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Whew. That's a heavy sermon right there. Look at it in Isaiah 57. Isaiah 57 verse 20. We hadn't even made it halfway through. Isaiah 57:20. But the wicked are like the troubled sea, that is, it's been stirred up, when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. Filth. Filth comes to the surface. Now for a Christian, we should get that filth washed out, not let it rage and boil. And people have this idea that you should vent. No, all that is that's demonic. It's you foaming out your own mire and dirt. What you need to do is go in private and ask God to get rid of it.
Amen.
Wash it away. Verse 21, there is no peace, saith my God, to the wicked. Venting doesn't give you peace. It builds up so that you can recall for the next time you want to do it, and you become a professional at it. Hosea 10 verse 8. Hosea 10 verse 8. Here's this nickname for Beth Aven that I gave you. Hosea 10:8. The high places also of Avim, the sin of Israel, shall be destroyed. The thorn and the thistle shall come up on her altars, and they shall say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. Okay, this is, we've seen, I think we covered this when we covered another verse previous. But here he's saying, this sin of Avim, Beth Aven, and it's going to destroy them forever. Isaiah 21, or Isaiah 2, verse 19, 2:19. Isaiah 2:19. A man cannot die unless God says he can. Man doesn't get a choice in that. Man thinks he's powerful, even thinks he has the right to commit suicide. It's of God's mercy he allows anybody to commit suicide. He controls life and death. And in the tribulation, he tells you, I'm not going to allow anybody to die. I'm going to be taking the lives. When you seek it, I'll make it run from you. Wow. Isaiah 2, verse 19. They shall go into the holes of the rocks and into the caves of the earth for fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth. Now there's Elvis' song right there, a whole lot of shaking. But he doesn't really understand what's going on here. Luke 23, verse 30. Luke 23, verse 30. I'm sure glad I'm not going to be around for that tribulation time period. Luke 23:30. Jesus says, then shall they begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. When God's mad, you don't even want to feel his presence right now. Imagine when it's going to be visible. And he comes back in order to wreak havoc. Look at it in Revelation 6:16. Revelation 6:16. Here's what's going on in the tribulation. And said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Could you imagine a lamb that you were so scared of when it got mad that you had to run to a hole in the ground and beg a mountain to fall on top of you? Well, that's not the kind of lambs we know anything about. But this lamb right here can be the best thing you've ever found or your worst nightmare.
Amen.
Revelation 9, verse 6. And in those days shall men seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. God's in control of that. Not the devil and not man. God's in control of it. Now he's wreaking havoc on Israel as a nation because they broke his covenant. And this is how it culminates at the end. And we probably better stop it there. Well, we're still early. What time did we start? No, we're late. What time did we start? We started at 6:30 tonight. Yeah, I better shut it off. Okay, we'll pick up at Hosea 10:9 next time. I wanted to really get you down to, there's some good stuff in here. I'm just going to give you a
What
little
was all that stuff
teaser.
for?
Look at Hosea let's see, where were we? 10. I'm going to show you there is coming up something spectacular. Hosea 10:12. In the midst of all this killing and suffering and all that stuff, God throws in mercy. Watch this, verse 12. Sow to yourselves in righteousness, reap in mercy. How about that? Right in the book of Hosea, where God's just destroying everything he sees, he gives them a formula to get out of trouble. That's a pretty good deal. Look over at chapter 11, verse 5, and then I'll shut up, maybe. Hosea 11, verse 5. He shall not return unto the land of Egypt, but the Assyrian shall be his king, because he refuseth to return. That's Israel as a nation. He's referring to him as the nation. Imagine that could have been swapped, though. He was given an opportunity to return. And because he did not return, he got a phony king. But the implication is God was willing for them to return to him, and he would be their king again. But they refused it, and that's why Assyria came in. All right, that's some good stuff in there, and we'll catch up to some of that next week.